Hi, and welcome to the Joyful Balance podcast. You're here with your hosts. I'm Meera. I'm a neuroscientist and nutritionist, and I've got my co host here, Denise,
Hey.
who is a cognitive behavioral hypnotherapist. We're here to take you on a journey to understanding your mind, your brain, and your body, and how all of these three things are interlinked. Denise has got the psychology covered. I cover the nutrition and neuroscience. And so we're going to take you through how to understand how all of these three things are interlinked. And we're on this journey with you, and we're discovering all these things alongside you too. So, on today's episode, I'm going to let Denise take the reins, and we're going to talk about emotions and food, right? And how they're all interlinked. How are you doing, Denise?
Absolutely. I'm good. I'm actually this is the right episode for me today.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, in the sense that after a couple of days of eating not for the right reasons, this feels like my own episode for myself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hear you. I know what you mean. Yeah. So, you're in good company. Don't worry.
Yes. How are you doing? How are things with you?
Yeah, good. I was on holiday last week, but obviously when this episode comes out, it would be have been much longer. So just getting back into the swing of things, but glad that UK still having a heat wave, so I don't feel too sad about being home.
Mm. Yes, I concur. I'm also enjoying the heat. So yay, we have a summer.
Yeah, I know, thank God.
Yes. So, yeah, I wanted to talk to everyone today about food and about emotions, and maybe we would touch upon the nutrition side of things as well, because that's just the nature of the topic. But I was just wanted to start with a question. So, why do we eat? Why do you think we eat, Mira?
Well, I think there's two main reasons to my mind why we eat. One is for nutrition, obviously, but the other is for pleasure. Um, so obviously we eat to get energy, to get neurotransmitters, to get vitamins and minerals that help make neurotransmitters. Um, and we also eat for enjoyment because food should be enjoyed.
Yes, 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 yes. That's absolutely spot on. We would focus a little bit more today on the side of food and enjoyment and emotions and pleasure, rather than the nutrition side, because Mira has a spectacular episode all about that, and she will share with us in our next episode a lot of it. But for today, I am just thinking to maybe demystify a little bit about emotional eating, because sometimes it tends to have this bad reputation that something is wrong with you if you are eating because of your emotions.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, as you're just here, my little guinea pig, but you guys listening, just ask yourselves, have you ever eaten when you were bored?
Oh, 100%. Like it can still happen now. Like yeah, I think when I'm trying to settle down and do a piece of work that I don't really want to do, or I just don't really want to sit down and focus, I find that I'll be like, okay, well, if I get like a snack or something from the fridge, then that will make me sit down and actually sit at my computer and do something useful.
Yeah.
So that tends to be, yeah, when I'm most likely, I think, to eat out of boredom. But yeah, I absolutely do that.
Hmm. Yes, and I would like to say that boredom is just one of them.
Yep.
Absolutely, just one of them. Another one that Mira just was touching upon is procrastination. It's
Yep.
like it goes hand in hand. Is what if I just had this beautiful, cup of tea with some biscuits, and then I will go into whatever I need to be doing. Well, if you're like me, many biscuits later, you're still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and I just wanted to touch on these things because there's nothing wrong with you if you do that. Now, in all seriousness, there isn't a um, an imbalance necessarily that is triggering you to do that. Food is such a um, has such a strong connection to who we are and how we were brought up and the culture we come from. and how we have been, educated since we were little to consider food. So if you think about some cultures, most of them out there will give you a sweet treat as it's your birthday. You've graduated from, I don't know, your first grade in school, and you've done something good. And then food also becomes the lack of, not necessarily food, but treats becomes the punishment. Oh, you've been naughty, you haven't been, taking the best grades in school, or you haven't done X or Y. Therefore, something that you really, really want as a child gets taken away from you, because that's in a way, a punishment.
Yeah.
And what I have seen with a lot of my clients, and with myself included, is that even to this day, as an adult, I see food as reward. And I was wondering if you could, Meera, give us a very short snap as to what happens with our body or our brain when the food we eat is literally touching those pleasure centers.
Yeah. So in your brain, you've got areas in your brain that register reward and the sense of pleasure when you receive a reward, and that can be a reward in a classic sense of like you go out and buy a new handbag because you got a promotion at work, or it can be that you buy yourself some new beauty thing in the shops because you've had a hard day. But also it can be activated by food too, and it relies on a very key neurotransmitter called dopamine, which is what helps you feel that sense of pleasure and reward. That's the neurotransmitter that signals to your brain that, hey, you're receiving a reward.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, when you're eating pleasurable foods, you're absolutely activating those pathways. And I do talk about this in a different episode, but essentially what can happen is that your brain can become desensitized to dopamine. So because you're constantly getting these rewards, your brain cells are shutting down to the message of dopamine to try and regulate the amounts of dopamine that's constantly being pinged off. And as a result, you're needing more and more like stimulation, more and more reward to get that same hit of dopamine to feel that sense of reward. So it's kind of a little bit in the same way as one can imagine addictions of any kind, like anything that is rewarding, it's essentially the same thing is happening. So that's kind of the key things to bear in mind. So I think what I got across in that episode that I'll repeat here is like, there's nothing wrong with you. It's not your quote unquote fault. These are really natural, instinctive, and very, very powerful forces at play. And it's just about understanding them and how else you can activate those same areas to feel a reward that aren't necessarily food related and still really healthy for you. Yeah. And then the last thing I will say is, certain foods are geared and are made because they really hit on those pleasure centers. So for example, foods that are high in salt, fat, sugar are really great at activating the pleasure centers in your brain, which is why they are so pleasing to eat. So again, it's literally the food has been made to hit these reward areas, which is what makes them so enticing. But there are other ways that you can activate these pleasure centers, and we can always come back to this at a later point, but I'll let Denise carry on.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting, because what people normally experience is that this, let's stay with an example of a treat. You eat your dinner, and every dinner you have a piece of cake, let's say, right at the end. As Meera was pointing out, at some point that dopamine release just gets not recognized as powerful as it is by the body. So basically you will end up getting maybe 2 pieces of cake, because one is not so much rewarding anymore. It's like, meh, did I really have it? And then you might end up on a slippery slope where you see yourself finding desserts, or maybe any other thing, crisps, popcorn. It doesn't have to be a dessert, something that you associate as a treat, and you're having more of it. And because you're having more of it, you are thinking to yourself, oh, I'm bad. Oh, I've had so much of X, Y, and Z. I shouldn't have it. And then the all or nothing good, bad food comes into play as well for some people, where they see some foods as good, some foods as bad. And if they had a bad food, i.e. cake, let's say, then they are bad.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, my dear friends, opens up the cycle of viciousness, because the more you think I've done something bad, the more your emotions take over. And if you're not really in touch with your emotions, you might feel maybe a little bit angry or sad, or you're not very happy at that particular time. And you know, food is historically something that used to make you happy. Therefore, you will want more of it.
Yeah.
And
It can
then
all, yeah. And you get the guilt as well. And yeah.
exactly, and the guilt kicks in, and then you, as Meera was explaining to us earlier, your dopamine centers are, not up and running as they should be normally, constantly. So then you want more of it, and then it continues to be into this vicious circle. And I just wanted to say that it is possible to break the vicious circle. And yes, we call it sometimes emotional eating because it is linked to the emotions, but it doesn't always have to be called in this way.
Yeah, I think it definitely gets stigmatized. I think from a perspective of someone lacking self-control, and it's just not that black and white, and it's not about someone's mastery over their own behavior, but it's just that things are working against them, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think no one chooses to, when they're having difficult, whether it's they're bored or they're feeling sad or they're lonely or stressed, all of these things can trigger us to eat, right? Because we want to feel better. But I don't think it's helpful to class them as an emotional eater, because it doesn't really explain the whole situation for that person very fairly. And it's just, I think it's just a lot of stigma attached to it, which is just unhelpful. So I mean, personally, in the circles that I sit in, I don't ever speak about being, I don't ever give a label, or would be appreciate a label of emotional eater, as it were, because we all eat. It's irrespective of our emotions or not. But yeah, it's an unhelpful term, I think. I don't know how you feel about it.
Feel exactly the same. It's it's showcasing such a small facet of that individual, of that person. And yet again, we all eat and we all have emotions. Some of us might not be in touch with our emotions. Might not be aware of them. They might influence us, but we are not aware of it because, emotional dissociation and trauma responses and many other reasons why.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we don't have emotions, and it doesn't mean that we don't eat.
Yeah.
So if you think about us humans as primitive beings, we always seek pleasure and pain. And I think what I was trying to say at the beginning of this episode is the fact that sometimes we associated food with the pure pleasure of it, celebratory, happy, but we also associated with pain, in the quote unquote pain as in hunger. So if you're feeling a little bit pain, what I mean here is hunger, you go and you eat. Therefore, you have the pleasure of the substance and the food and the drink. And once the emotions become involved, we avoid some painful emotions, let's say anger, sadness, despair, grief, and we try to find the pleasure. And for sometimes not the right reasons, we go to food because that's what we primitively know as it will, stifle the pain. Have you come across people who have this type of maybe relationship to food in your private practice, Meera?
It happens. I think it happens quite a lot. Like, even if I talk about myself specifically, definitely boredom is a big trigger for me, but also sometimes certain aspect, like certain stressful events, not specific stressful events, but there's just a certain level of stress that seems to make me eat more, and then when I go past that, it makes me eat less. because I'm that point I'm probably just anxious, but it's so common. It's so common. I could not even put a figure on it. I see it very routinely.
Mm, mm.
I
And
imagine when you do in your work too, right?
yes, I tend to work with people who struggle with weight management anyways, and they turn to me, and we have sessions about their relationship to food and things. But what I realize most often than not, it is about habits, and it is about learned behavior and habits that have happened, during the course of that individual. And I don't um, I don't link so much of the emotional connection to food, because eliminating the emotional connection to food is like we would not be humans anymore. We
Yeah,
will always have an emotional connection to food because that's just how we are wired. But I'm trying to focus more on the habits and on the associations that people have. And as you were saying about the reward system, normally what I'm trying to do with people who are associating reward and pleasure just with food, I ask them to go on a journey of experimenting what else they can reward themselves with.
yeah,
Like you were saying, the bag, or it could be something like a bubble bath, a manicure, going out for a run with your dog. It doesn't have to be food
food
related.
related, absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. And it is a matter of taking the choice of behaving in a certain way without necessarily acting on the impulse. Because let's be honest, we are all sitting there in front of the TV, or Netflix or whatever else,
hmm,
and we don't want to do the work we need to do because we're humans.
yep,
And then we end up going like, oh, let's have a crisp. And then after a bag of crisps, you're still there having a crisp.
yeah.
But
It's
that is an impulse, isn't something that you plan your life around.
yeah, and I think this whole idea of like activating your reward system without necessarily engaging in the eating side of it is actually really important. And I agree that it's much more about habits. And it's not that you have to constantly ignore the impulse
Hmm.
to eat. It's just about making really conscious choices about what you eat, and when you eat, and why you're eating. It's that, yeah, are kind of the three key things, aren't they? So I think always like it's always about I think in the habit building aspect of like wondering, well, how do I do that when I'm sitting on the couch and like, or I'm at my desk at work and I'm kind of a bit peckish. It's just to take a second and pause and think,
Hmm.
why do I want this snack? What am I eating for? um like, am I actually hungry, or am I bored, or am I stressed, or whatever? And then in that microsecond of pausing to really interrogate that feeling, you can then think, okay, well, if it's that I'm bored and I'm at work or whatever, can I go up? Can I stretch my legs for 5 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Can I go and speak to a coworker and catch and find out with them how their day's going? Or can I, you know, do whatever it is that in that 5 minute space that kind of gives you space to think about whether it is that you do need to engage in these habits and what else you can do. And I think when you start that micro pause, it just makes it easier for you to think through before you act. Because also in a previous episode we had talked about your prefrontal cortex, which is like your decision maker. It's where you inhibit your impulses. It takes a little bit longer to kick in than your older centers, which are much more geared around your emotions and immediate reactions, is centered. So to give basically space for your brain to actually think through an action, it's really important to give that micro pause.
Mm. Yes. We mentioned micropause, I think, almost in all of the episodes we've ever done, guys.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
We really want to encourage you to take that second minute, whatever it is, however long it is for you, just to get it into your normal practice, because that's it's so valuable,
Yeah.
and it's so disregarded sometimes because it doesn't feel huge enough. So if you're talking to people who may have been labeled as emotional eaters in the past in the wrongful way, because we just agreed we don't like this label at all, and you're telling them they have to change, their imagination is that everything has to completely change
Yep.
instantly. Versus what we are trying to advocate here is that this little pause, this coming back to the present moment, this interrogation, this becoming your own detective and expert on yourself,
Yep.
it's actually tiny compared to huge changes, but it has such a sustainable way of pushing you forward. Because you can start with it with food. Let's say food is the one that you think you might have a quote unquote problem with. Then if you do that and you've mastered it, then you're gonna think, oh, maybe this is the same for when I'm very angry and I impulsively react. Well, you can do the same
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Or when you are in a situation at work where your boss has told you something that really hurts your feelings and you want to react, that's again, you can apply this principle. So it's a very small piece of the puzzle, but because it's small, I would say don't disregard it. And that's
No, and it's been one of the most powerful learnings I think I've had, like, in the last sort of year or so, is that idea of a micropause. And just exactly as you were saying, like, uh someone, let's just say a partner, for example, has said something that's gonna, what, like, like our loved ones do. They're very capable of pushing a buttons, right? So instead of having that moment where you're like, instead of not thinking and just reacting, if you take a pause and you just think, okay, well, what's the outcome I'm hoping for here, and what will my action probably produce? And it's like, well, I can shout at them, but is that going to get the reaction I want? Probably not. Or if I can just walk away, or if I can say that's not really helpful, it just, you will never regret taking that
hmm,
pause, I don't think.
hmm,
um and just, yeah, and just thinking it through. And I think when it, even when it, for me, like, if I'm out, food shopping, grocery shopping, whatever, and I'm like, oh, that new, like, I don't know, let's just for example say, okay, I really like Manchego flavored crisps. This is like true story. And there's a couple of places you can get them, and sometimes I will buy them. But then sometimes I'm like, do I really want them, or am I just like bored, or am I using it as an excuse to eat when I'm bored? And then so sometimes I just won't. And it's
hmm.
just having that micro pause is so, so valuable in so many areas of life. Like, it's definitely been one of the most powerful things I think I've learned in the last couple of years, for sure.
Hmm. I echo that, and in a on a personal note, I was in a um, more emotionally charged situation recently, and mind you, guys, I wouldn't be able to do this if it was me 5 years ago. But this is me today with
Mhm.
the knowledge and the therapy that I've done, and I was able, because of the practice, to put a thought stop and to just take a moment, breathe, and before reacting in any sort of way, I just asked myself, what will be helpful? I
Yep.
didn't, I didn't ask anything else of, should I hurt them back or should I react like this, or and it wasn't whether or not it will make me feel better. My question to myself was, what would be helpful?
Yeah.
And it was just, what will be helpful in my response, how will I feel more the best is with that helpfulness, how will it affect me today, as in on the spot when I was in this situation, and also how will it make me feel tomorrow and the
Yep.
day after. And it's the same principle I apply to food now. And I was just saying at the beginning of this episode that I had my little journey with food, because food and I, we are so interlinked. But I didn't know we were interlinked until I started this interrogation of myself. And then I realized that predominantly I eat when I'm bored or procrastinating. And because I was putting off some tasks this week, it's laughable now. I was just like, maybe have a snack. Well, maybe have some soup. I'm not so much as a sweet tooth type of person, so I don't really turn to cakes and chocolate.
Mm.
Luckily for me, I don't go out of my house to buy them. So these days that I was telling you about my eating due to procrastination, I didn't go out of my way to buy food, but overindulged on the things that I had in the house.
Yeah.
So instead of having one portion of food as a normal human should have, I was like having three.
Yeah.
And then I was feeling really crappy, not guilty, because not guilty, not shame, but my body was like, what the hell? What the hell did you just give me? Why did you eat so much?
Mm.
And I think that's, another lesson for me was once I realized the uncomfortableness of overeating, I was thinking, oh, definitely I overdone it. And that was my wake up call.
No, thanks for sharing. Like, yeah, I mean, with me, it's definitely chocolate is like my comfort food of choice. Like, that's the one I'll always go to. I mean, even now, even though will almost always eat sort of dark chocolate, at least 70%, which is better. Um, I realized I was like, yeah, I'm relying on it more than I'm comfortable with. So I just decided to do an experiment and see if I could go. I mean, you don't have to be this extreme, but I know me, and I know if it's in the house, I'm going to want to eat it. So just stop buying it.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I did.
Very good, because I do the same thing. I don't buy it.
I just don't buy it. Yeah. So, and actually, like, it was like I looked at my grocery bill and it's a lot less. And I was like, well, not a lot less because I wasn't buying that much, but it was less. And I was like, oh, this is the benefit of not buying it every single time. That doesn't mean I won't have it if it's offered or like if it's around, but just in terms of like quote unquote needing it to uh feel rewarded, it's like just take it out, like, and just experiment, see what happens. Like, it's not that I'm banning chocolate for the rest of my life. Like, no, life would be terrible if I did that for me. But it's just experimenting to see if I can modify my relationship with chocolate. And surprisingly, I'm finding it easier than I thought I would.
That's really well. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. That's what it is, guys. You have to become the best detective at yourself, because you would realize things, and we've all been there. We've all learned more or less what it means to have a healthy diet, and we kind of, maybe some of us better than others, understand what we should be having, what we shouldn't be having, or what we should be avoiding or having less quantity of. But I think when we are interrogating and investigating, we will also realize that we might turn to food or to larger quantities of food because we might be skipping meals, or we might not be, fulfilling our nutrient need to the extent that it needs to be for our body. And correct me, Meera, if I'm wrong, but what I've learned is that your body needs nutrients, right, to function.
Mm-hmm.
We need carbs, we need energy, we need all of this. We need vitamins and so on and so forth. And if we decide, for whatever strange reason, to no longer ever eat carbs, and we're cutting off entire food groups, and we are just, I don't know, eating steak forever, your body might still be like, okay, I've just ate, fine, thank you for the protein, but I'm still lacking something, and it will kind of feel like you're still not full, and you would still be trying to get something else. Maybe you will turn to cake because you thought, okay, I've had steak, now I'll have dessert, and your body's still like, okay, thank you, you've gave me something, but where are my nutrients?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible to still feel like you're craving certain things because you are potentially lacking in nutrients. I think carbs is a really interesting one because they've been so successfully demonized, and nutritional science, guys, is far more complicated than you would imagine. And for a very small subsection of the population in certain situations, there may be an argument for limiting carbohydrates, but for the vast majority of us, it's not necessary and necessarily healthful to do that. For example, the Atkins diet was touted to be really, really healthy, which was very low carbohydrate, high protein/fat. But then, since, like, no nutritionist that I know would recommend it now as a diet geared towards health. And that's because you're relying on a lot of unhealthy fats as one of your sources of fuel, which just does no favors for your body whatsoever. And yeah, so what I would say is kind of that. And what I also wanted to say, going back to a point that you had made, just a couple of seconds ago about, we've all been there. We have. And let me tell you, I am a nutritionist who is friends with other nutritionists. We will all have days when we are less on top of our diet game, or, we're having a hard day and we go for a brownie. Like, even as nutritionists, I know a lot of nutritionists who do that. I am a nutritionist. I have done that and will do that. So please don't sit there thinking that it's only you that feels that struggle, that pull and that struggle. Even paid professionals do too, whose lifeblood it is. And there will be some nutritionists out there who probably never do that. And, great for them. But, that's not where the majority of us lie.
I think it all comes down to maybe no, scrap that. It
Okay.
doesn't come down to something. We are all individuals, and my chemicals in my body, the way they get triggered and the way I function are not, I'm not saying they're completely different than yours, because we are, at a molecular level, we're built in the same way. But what I get genetics in me from my parents, ancestors, it's very different maybe from what you or the listeners have. And the way our brains are wired, or our lacks of vitamins and minerals.
The way we've been brought up.
Exactly. Yeah. Culture, environment, where we are in our relationships, how connected we feel to other people versus how lonely we feel. All of this come into play. So that's why I wanted to say it's not like it all comes down to, no, all of these come into play when we are thinking about our relationships with food. And maybe, as you say, some people don't have a quote unquote naughty day, but majority of us at some point do.
Yep.
And what takes us out of it and what makes us more consistent than others in this field is the fact that we know how to support our own success. And it comes down to a previous episode with Andrea where we were talking about, setting ourselves up for success via a system of habits. And it links very nicely into what Meera and I want to share with you today, guys, as tips and tricks that, we found helpful, and we've researched or we've read the research for it. And just to give you some pointers, if you are thinking your relationship with food is not the one you would like to have, or if you want to slightly alter it or visit it, I would say eat slowly. That's my number one tip. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter if it's a steak, an ice cream, a salad, a piece of avocado, whatever it is, don't rush it. That's my number one tip. And my number two is eat as varied as you can possibly imagine. I know some people don't like certain foods, and they don't like vegetables, or they don't like proteins, or they're vegetarian or pescatarian, or whatever it is. Just diversify as much as you can within your, type of journey with food. For me personally, the more veggies, the better. Not because I'm vegetarian, but because I am not the biggest lover of meat. Yes, I love chicken and fish and, shellfish. Luckily, I'm not allergic. That would be a pity for me. And also, seafood stuff. And I try to diversify. Obviously, I can't always eat octopus, and I can't always eat, I don't know, my mom's homemade potato stew, but I diversify. Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yum.
It's the recipe that side note, we all tried in the family to repeat her recipe word by word.
Can't do it.
With her on the phone. It tastes good, but it doesn't taste like hers.
Oh, bless. Yeah, it's funny. Well, I don't know. Does your mom ever measure anything out?
Never.
It's
from the eye. She says it's from the eye.
It's the same with my mom. Like, because I'm from an Indian background, and if you ask my mom, okay, but how much like turmeric did you put in? She'll tell you this much. She'll give you that, and I'm like, that means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. But it astounds me that it comes out the exact same every single time she makes it. So I've got no hope of replicating her cooking as much as I might try. But
same. I remember to this day the first time I made a soup. I'm Eastern European. I was born in Eastern Europe, in Romania, but it's a soup that other people have it. I've discovered over the years. So it's basically, it looks like a matzo soup.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we call it completely different. Anyways, it's a very simple vegetable type soup with some dumplings.
Dumplings, nice.
And I called and I did this recipe. I was 14 years old with my phone, with my mom on the other line. I knew how to chop vegetables and everything else. So that wasn't difficult. But she was like, okay, and now you make the dumplings. And I said, okay, how much do I put of this and this? And how much egg? One, two. But decide, woman, one or two. Depends on the big size of your pot. How big is your pot? I was looking at it. I had no idea. It's a pot. It's a pot of soup. Is it a 2 liter or a 5? I was like, okay, this is not going to work. So just tell me like the average. Anyway, she gave me those tips. And then she said, and now you put the flour. How much flour? From the eye. Said,
oh, for God's sake. Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I was mixing the eggs. And then she says, well, depends how much you put in, because it turns into a pasta. And I said, well, does it have to be thick or runny? And she was from the eyes. So in the end, they worked out, and I still have that. I replicate that recipe, and it's a good one, and I'm quite happy to make it. But it's just so magic. It's just magical. Women cooking is magical.
Really is. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and just coming back to that piece that I was just finishing off my idea, and I let Meera give you her top tips. I would just say, guys, eat slowly and diversify. Put as much of food and different types of food and different groups, and just see what happens. Don't restrict yourself. I that's number 3. Sorry, last one, Meera.
That's okay.
Don't restrict yourself.
Okay, so what are mine? I think mine are take that micro moment and pause and think, why is it you feel like you want to eat? It's not that it's wrong to eat, it's just ask yourself why. If it's like, if it's like, I'm not actually hungry, but I'm feeling like I want to eat, then see if there's potentially something else you could do. Drinking water can be really helpful just for resetting your appetite. Maybe just go for, if you're tempted to, for example, to have a scoop of ice cream or whatever it is, think, okay, well, can I have a piece of fruit instead? See if you can make a swap just for a healthier alternative. And find things that you enjoy that aren't necessarily food related. So like I said, if it's like you need to stretch your legs, go out and spend 5 minutes in the garden soaking up some of this incredible sunshine. Although I appreciate when we probably release this, it'll be much colder. But see if you can go out, pet your dog, call your mum for 5 minutes and ask her about a recipe or whatever it might be. See if you can just replace it. It doesn't mean that you don't act on the desire to do something, but just see if you can replace it with a healthy alternative. And there are ways that you can tap into your dopamine reward system without it necessarily being food specific. So, I mean, obviously I don't encourage replacing eating certain foods with shopping, but maybe it's like, I don't know, going online and having a look at a few online shops, or like maybe it's like buying something from your Amazon wish list, or it can be taking a cold shower. That's been known to increase dopamine. There are other ways, and we can always, if it's of interest, I can link in a few more below, and I probably will. But there are definitely other natural ways that you can tap into dopamine without it being specific to food. Exercise also increases dopamine as well. So go outside for a 15-minute walk and get some fresh air. All of these things can be really helpful. And okay, so what have I said? I've said micro moment of pause, see if you can make a healthy swap, and find other ways of increasing dopamine. Those are probably my top 3. And I completely echo what Denise was saying about diversity. It's such an important integral part of eating well for your brain, because it helps to provide, it gives you all different nutrients by balancing out your intake across a lot of food groups. It means that you're not overdoing it on one and underdoing it on another. Naturally, you're kind of getting a bit of better balance. And also it's really important for your gut bacteria, which is massively important for your brain health too. So that's why diversity is really, really, really crucial as well. my last other tips, make sure you're sleeping enough. Because if you're tired, you are going to want to snack more, you will want more sugar, you will want more caffeine, and it's a vicious cycle. And also, if you can, manage your stress levels, because again, that can cause appetite to either go up or down. Most typically, what I find with clients is it will go up. So yeah, so sorry, that's 3, that's turned into 5 tips, but those are my top ones for you.
It's absolutely fine. You've sprinkled the last 2, which I wanted to mention anyway. Sleep is, yeah, it's not a luxury. It's something that we need biologically.
A necessity, yeah, it's vital to survival.
Absolutely. And on stress, you probably know from a previous episode, but my whole journey into therapy, into cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy and everything else started because of too much of cortisol that was going haywire with everything and affecting my weight and so on. The last one, the very last one that came to my mind, and I said it's too important to miss out, is connectedness. Sometimes we eat because we are lonely, or we think we are lonely, or we think that we need to go through something by ourselves, and then we forget that we are so connected to other humans. And if you find yourself feeling lonely at any point, just reach out to somebody close to your heart. And that also can, help, as Meera was saying. Call your mom, call a family member when you're thinking of eating and you think you are not really hungry, you're just eating just because. Yes, that's everything for today. Hopefully it brings a little bit more, peacefulness to you, and you understand that you're not alone in this journey, and that food is so interlinked to emotions, and emotions are dictating other things in ourselves, and there is a way to make sure you're in balance with yourself, and that's what both of us were advocating, is balance.
Totally, exactly.
Thank you so much, Meera, for having this chat with me today, and thank you guys for listening. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you take some useful tips out of this and give us a follow, show us some love, share it with other people. We're still at the beginning of this first season of the Joyful Balance podcast, and we look forward to seeing you soon again.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.